Scariest urban legends caught on camera. Slenderman. 3 teens were exploring an abandoned house when this happened.
Hear-ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
This mannequin is so lifelike that people believe it to be a preserved corpse. La Pasqualita isn't like other department store mannequins. She was constructed with such expression and such detail that her legs even have varicose veins. She first appeared in the window of a bridal shop in Mexico in 1930, and she has been turning heads ever since. But it's not just because of her realistic appearance. She also bears a very close resemblance to the shop owner's daughter. The legend goes that she was bitten by a black widow spider while preparing to be married and succumbed to its poison on her wedding day. And it wasn't long after her death that the mannequin appeared in the window. Customers of the store say they feel very nervous around her and that her eyes follow them, and she even changes positions. What do you think? A mannequin with a few extra bells and whistles, or the preserved body of a woman who died in a tragic way?
A family in New Zealand found human remains inside of a storage locker they won through an auction. It's typical for storage units to be put up for auction if they have been unclaimed and unused for many years. This New Zealand family won a specific storage locker and they were emptying it out, found some suitcases. Upon realizing that the suitcases smelled terrible, they opened them up and found decomposing bodies. These bodies were later identified to be 2 children, one 5 years old and the other about 10 years old. While we don't know how long they were in the storage locker, it does seem like they had been there for a good amount of time. The only lead right now is police think that the children's mother is living in South Korea and she arrived there in 2018. Other than that, we don't really know much about this case yet.
3 urban legends that turned out to be true. Number 1. In the 1980s, parents in Long Island terrified their children with the legend of Cropsey. He was a murderous man who lived beneath an abandoned school and would capture children. But it was later found that the old janitor of the school was still living on school grounds, and it's believed he was responsible for the disappearance of several kids, which made the legend of Cropsey true. Number 2. Charlie No Face was the terrifying legend of a featureless man who would roam the streets of Pittsburgh at night. But it was discovered that this man did exist. His name was Raymond Robinson. He was a very nice guy, and he only left his house at night as he feared his deformity would scare people. Number 3. Legend has it that an escaped asylum patient roams near the Fairfax County Bridge where countless amounts of dead rabbits have been found. There wasn't any legitimacy to this legend until a couple drove through this bridge in the 1970s only to find a man dressed as a bunny who threw an axe through their windshield before they got away.
People are freaking out about this video. Last year, a TikTok user by the name of Chell uploaded this to his account. Supposedly, he was trying to show off his Halloween decorations when he turns the camera to film a creepy church across the street. What happens next is either a clever practical effect, or it could be a real video.
You got me, man. You guys keep doing it. I love it. It's awesome. Anyway, I thought about like adding stuff to it, but Jim, you got me. I don't know what their problem is. I'm gonna keep doing this shit. I'm just gonna stare at them then. Okay, right. Go. And just stay in your room. What do you want, man?
I have an update on the serial killer who is on the loose in California right now. If you've missed my prior videos, there is an actual serial killer who is on the loose right now in California. At the time of my last video, he had a total of 5 murders under his belt, but I regret to inform you that since then, he has added 1 more to the list, bringing the death total up to 6. He was also blamed for wounding a woman via gunshot wound, which is very out of character for him because we've realized that all of his victims have been male and 4 out of 5 of the last prior victims were all Hispanic. So very out of character for him. But I make this video to tell you this. If you live in Stockton or any of the surrounding cities, or quite frankly anywhere in California at this point, especially Central California, you need to be on guard and stay diligent. Make sure you lock your doors at night and make sure you limit how often you go out at nighttime, especially if you live in Stockton or any of the surrounding cities. It may sound extreme, but one of the most important things right now is your general safety. And that's all I got for now. I'll continue to keep you updated on the situation, but for now,
Lee Gi-young, in the picture behind me, has caused a stir in Korea and is a likely example of why you should be careful when random individuals approach you on the street. One day, Lee Gi-young, in the circle behind me, approached a bunch of young guys. Then, he took them out for Korean barbecue. Then they all sat around eating and drinking soju, and it seemed like Lee Gi-young was kind of leading the vibe, if you know what I mean. Now, this was on or around a holiday in Korea, and Lee Gi-young is out with a bunch of young random guys. Then, it's reported that he started to get really aggressive with the guys and started attacking them. In the scene, he also headbutts someone and really has a tussle with them. During the dinner, Lee Gi-young told the young guys that he was the owner of 8 buildings. He also asked them if they would be able to end someone. Lee Gi-young went to the hospital for his injuries, and he was arrested on suspicion of ending his girlfriend and a taxi driver. Here he is in custody at one of the relevant scenes.
The twist at the end of this story is shocking. In 2006, Els van Doren jumped out of a plane. Van Doren was an experienced skydiver with more than 2,300 jumps behind her. Van Doren was part of a skydiving club in Belgium. She was joined by 12 fellow skydivers, including her best friend, Els Klotterman. Whilst free-falling, the skydivers joined hands to form a ring and then let go, known as a star maneuver. Unfortunately, her best friend's Els Klotterman was slightly delayed jumping out of the plane, missing the star maneuver and watching on from above. When it was time for Van Doren to deploy her chute, nothing happened. She desperately tried to activate the reserve chute, but still, nothing happened. Her stomach dropped. She was 4,500 feet from the ground, with no way of landing. From the footage captured on her headcam, we know that Van Doren screamed for half a mile down, frantically trying to open her chutes, plummeting at 120 miles per hour, looking up to the sky for a parachute that never appeared, until she eventually hit the ground and died instantly. Investigators suspected foul play, and that her death was intentional. The truth is, Van Doren had been leading a double life. She spent the week with her husband and children, and the weekend skydiving with her long-term secret lover, Marcel Sommer. However, what Van Doren didn't know was that her lover was also sleeping with her best friend, Els Klotterman. The 3 of them all spent a night together at Marcel's home in Eindhoven. Van Doren and Marcel slept together, and Klotterman was co-signed to a mattress on the floor downstairs. Enraged by the sounds of lovemaking coming from upstairs, Klotterman took a pair of scissors and cut her best friend's parachute strings. Klotterman was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
So a thing that really keeps me up at night is the story of Kendrick Johnson. Have you guys ever heard of him?
No, who's that?
He was a high school student in Valdosta, Georgia. He just went missing. His family was really concerned. The cops were acting like, oh, he'll turn up, whatever. He went missing during gym class. They found his body rolled up in wrestling mats. The state police did a whole investigation, whatever. They just ruled it an accidental death by asphyxiation, which means he suffocated. The family wasn't buying this story. They thought that it was foul play and that somebody did something to him. So they got a private autopsy done. They found out that his organs in his body were removed and his body was stuffed with newspaper. And yeah, it's crazy to me because, okay, you could say, yeah, he fell down in the mat and he suffocated. Where did his organs go?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that part of the puzzle
end up in his body.
Could this statue truly be cursed? Known as the Swansea Devil or Old Nick to the locals, he dates all the way back to the 1890s. At the time, St. Mary's Church required renovation and the work was put out to bid. and a local architect was turned down for the renovations, and he was not happy about an outsider working on the church. To take his revenge, the architect purchased a row of cottages next to the church, demolished them, and built a single large brick office building. Atop his building, he put the Swansea Devil overlooking the church. Legend says he cursed the church by saying, "When your church is destroyed and burned to the ground, my devil will remain laughing." World War II brought much devastation to Swansea, destroying many buildings, including the St. Mary's Church. Undamaged was the building with the Swansea Devil, and he remained there until 1962 when the building was finally torn down. And then, for almost 20 years, the Swansea Devil disappeared. Eventually discovered in the garage of an antique dealer. He then floated around different locations until finally being placed in the Swansea Museum in 2019. He is positioned in his glass case to make sure he is still facing St. Mary's Church.
On May 1st, 2020, in Charleston County, South Carolina, 58-year-old Cynthia Covert was over at her friend and client Barbara's house doing Barbara's nails. And they were doing this appointment on Barbara's enclosed back porch, which overlooked her yard and then a large freshwater pond. Now, Barbara would later state that Cynthia was acting very strangely. Normally, she would be very, very professional, but today, not so much. She was talking a lot. She was just super bubbly. She was talking about her boyfriend who was coming to visit, and it was just totally unlike her. And she had showed up with a bottle of wine, although Barbara said she didn't witness her drink any of it. But anyways, the appointment carries on, and about halfway through, Cynthia looks over at the pond, and she notices that just off the bank in the water, there is a 10-foot or just over 3-meter long American alligator, and she's fascinated by this. And Barbara says, "Oh yeah, he's been here for the last 20 years, we just don't mess with him." So the appointment continues on, and they finish up, and when they do, Barbara begins to tidy up the porch, move chairs back where they were, when she turns around and notices that Cynthia has made her way down through the yard to the bank, and she's standing really close to this alligator, taking pictures of it on her cell phone. And Barbara immediately begins to yell and scream at her, "Hey, get back from there. I witnessed this alligator take a deer off the shore just yesterday." And Cynthia yells back at Barbara, and she says, "Well, I don't look like a deer." Now, Barbara's husband at this point can hear this commotion, and so can a next door neighbor, and both men make their way outside when Cynthia does the unthinkable. She steps in the water with the alligator, and she reaches out and she's going to try and pet it. And as soon as she does this 10-foot long alligator lunges forward and grabs her by the left leg and begins to drag her out into deeper water. The two men start sprinting down to the water. The neighbor grabs a rope. They get down there at the same time, and the neighbor throws the rope out to Cynthia. She grabs it, and now the two men are having a tug of war between them and this alligator for Cynthia. And then Cynthia would look up at them and just very calmly say, "Well, I guess that's the last time I'll ever do that." And then this alligator would put her into a death roll. And it would take her underwater, and they would not see her again. They called the police, the fire department, the police show up. For 15 minutes, they don't see anything, but then the alligator surfaces. It's still got Cynthia's body in its mouth, and then it immediately takes her back down before it resurfaces again. The police shoot the alligator 5 times, once in the head, 4 more times. It releases her. They retrieve her body, which is intact, but her left leg was totally mangled, and she had unfortunately drowned in that 15 minutes.
This is Albert Fish, the worst pedophile in American history. Oh yeah, and he was also a serial killer and a cannibal. So after torturing and murdering a number of young children, including Frances McDonald pictured right here, Albert Fish needed to escalate even further in his mind. He was allegedly experiencing psychosis, and he would later tell investigators that he was being told by God that he needed to kill and torture these young kids. And this is what leads us to Grace Budd. So initially, the Budd family had placed a wanted ad in the New York City newspapers that claimed that their son, Edward, wanted a position working out in the country. Albert Fish decided that this was another opportunity to grab another victim, so he paid the Budd family a visit. He would claim later on that he intended on mutilating, torturing, and killing Edward Budd, but when he went to the family's home, he was instead greeted by young 10-year-old Grace. So this is just horrible. This is Grace Budd. Albert was good with talking with people, so when he went to the family's home, he talked to the parents and everything, and then he told them that he had to go visit his niece for her birthday party later that day. And he invited young Grace to come along with him, and shockingly, the family said, yes, take her with you. But obviously, there was no birthday party, and Albert Fish took Grace Budd to this eerie old house known as Wisteria Cottage, and it was there where he tortured, murdered, and literally consumed her. So after he was done with Grace Budd, Albert Fish went home, and then he actually wrote a letter to the Budd family describing exactly what he had done to their daughter, and it is one of the most disturbing things that I've ever read in my life. I'm going to post an entire TikTok of the letter. Basically, we did a podcast about this story, and we read the whole letter in its entirety a year or so ago, and let me tell you, it is so disturbing. He talks about consuming the body, exactly how he murdered the young girl. He even talks about a friend that cannibalized young boys in another country earlier in life. It's one of the most disturbing things that you will ever read, but I'm going to post another TikTok with that entire audio in it. But that letter would prove to be Albert Fish's downfall. Now, the police were able to trace that letter. They interviewed people, and they determined that Albert Fish was the person who sent the letter. And so they arrested him, brought him in, and that's what blew this whole case open. After his arrest, they also discovered that Albert Fish had murdered another young boy. On February 11th, 1927, 3 young boys were playing in an apartment complex in Brooklyn, and one of them seemingly vanished into thin air. When they asked the other children what had happened to the other young boy, they replied that the boogeyman had taken them. Through investigation, the police were able to determine that Albert Fish was the one that had killed the young boy. And this was the trial of the century. There's so much that I could go into here that I don't have time for. You can listen to our podcast to find out what happened there. But Albert Fish was unrepentant till the very end. He even told investigators after he received the death penalty that frying in the electric chair would be a supreme thrill. I'm not kidding. It's even said that he helped the executioner secure the electrodes onto his own body. So yeah, he was obviously the worst.